suffering as the fruit of sin. There is a Christian conceit that suffering itself is a consequence of the sin of Eve and Adam. This is an idea directly derived from the punishment meted out by God in the aftermath of original sin to snake, man, and woman, or earned rightfully by reptile and human alike. The prideful serpent is doomed to crawl in the dust that is simultaneously death. The presumptuous woman to suffer and serve man in that suffering, and the arrogant and careless man to toil in sorrow against the pricks and die. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also, and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. Genesis 3:14-19. Consider for a moment the conditions of your own life. If you have not encountered the Spirit who punishes you for overweening pride, you are either fortunate beyond belief or self-deceptive to the point of delusion. It is rightly said that pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. If you presume to be much more than you are, if you presume a caring, like Eve, or a competence, like Adam, beyond that which is properly yours, then you have taken upon yourself more than you can rightfully manage, even though you may not immediately realize it. The complexity of the world, which you have carelessly invited in, will overwhelm you, and you will suffer dreadfully. If you take on in your vanity more than you can master, you will pay the price and fail and experience anxiety, grief, shame, and pain. It is therefore an open question whether suffering itself is a consequence of the structure of existence, of our subjugation to disease, insanity, social rejection, malevolence, and death, or whether it is equally or more or even completely a consequence of the foolish self-conceit that tempts us to claim narcissistically more than is warranted. Imagine that we confronted that which is anomalous, that which is outside and rejected, in the proper proportion, that we took on only those tasks for which we were truly suited. Imagine that on the feminine side, we insisted on our capacity only for the benevolent care we could competently provide, and without resentment. Imagine that on the masculine side, we admitted to the insufficiency of our conceptions, without insisting too self-servingly or tyrannically on their comprehensiveness or completeness, or agreeing too thoughtlessly to adjust them merely to impress. To what degree could we then face the challenges of the world, serious though they might be, in the spirit that could genuinely rise to meet and master them? To what degree could that be managed, say, in the spirit of serious play, rather than adopted as a too demanding, too burdensome, and consequently suffering-ridden venture? We desire above all, and appropriately, to find something to strive for and against. We search for an optimized challenge, not infantile dependency, for adventure, confrontation, and combat. We hope to find dragons of precisely the size we can slay, the size matched to or even slightly exceeding our levels of confidence and ability. That is the zone of proximal development, the place we play most effectively, the place we are most, or at least optimally, conscious. Could we not potentially dispense with much of the suffering in life, even contend most effectively against death itself, if we wholeheartedly and without reservation brought all the resources we have to bear on our problems? How much do we suffer because suffering is inevitable, given the limits of our mortal frames? And how much because we presume too much in our pride? On the compassionate side, Eve's side, we smother our children with the wonders of our excessive care so that we can benefit narcissistically and undeservedly from the praise given us by those who too carelessly observe our not at all selfless sacrifice. On the side of conceptualization and order, Adam's side, we can benefit narcissistically by falsely inflating our value to others. This means that we can put ourselves forward, and this is a typically masculine temptation, as productive and generous when we are in fact neither. This is precisely the ploy of the so-called dark tetrad personalities, the narcissists, manipulators, psychopaths, and sadists who manifest the very worst of masculine pride. The feminine equivalent has been somewhat understudied, probably because it is less likely to express itself in serious physical violence or theft. Why does the latter of these four pathological traits, sadism or delight in the pain of others, co-occur with the former three, and no doubt with the female equivalent? The proclivity to instrumentally use others for the sake of ill-gotten gains certainly allies itself with the willingness to employ force and compulsion. That, in turn, can and does transform itself into an overweening contempt for others. How else to justify the gains? And after that, into the belief or rationalization that whatever is contemptible is deserving of torture, even the belief that such torture is required on moral grounds. Maybe the weak have a lesson to learn. Maybe I'm just the one to teach them. Maybe some of that rationale is, as well, the desire for revenge on the targets of torture for being the pushovers who enabled the great sin of instrumental use and exploitation in the first place. Does the tyrant necessarily come to hate the slaves whose acquiescence, justifiable or not, forced or not, perverted his soul? Here's a fundamental question of religious faith. Do you believe that there is a spirit that both warns against and opposes pride? If, in the course of examining your own life, you conclude that you have never fallen because of pride or never been taken to task because of your tendency towards overreach, you are saint-like in the extreme, willfully blind in a manner that will lead you inevitably toward the pit, or an outright liar and doomed for that. Those are the options, as pride eternally goes before a fall. What dread spirit is it that brings about the fall? And in what manner are you subordinate to that, regardless of what you believe or claim to believe at the propositional level? It is after Eve hearkens to the voice of the serpent, insisting that she can incorporate what is in its essence poisonous, and after Adam, that primal fool, allows himself to claim similar power or immunity, that the fall itself occurs. The scales fall from the eyes of both God's wayward children. They can now see, as if they were gods, much of what they were not yet capable of consciously comprehending.